All right, everybody, it's 9 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. This is a Fort Myers Beach Management and Planning Session. Thursday, February the 10th, it's 9 a.m. All council members are present, town attorney, town manager, town clerk. Stand with and do the pledge before we get underway. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, only have 3 items on the agenda this morning. I've been told that the item B will go a lot quicker than item A, so why don't we spend, if it's okay with the rest of the council, if we can do switch the order here and do our presentation from Charge Point, and follow that up with the presentation by DRMP. It's okay with everybody?
No objection.
No objection, okay. Well, this morning we have Benjamin Paloon here from Optimus Energy Solutions, and he's going to talk to us about electric charging stations. Benjamin? Thanks. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. This is me here. All right. Thanks. Mayor Ben Paloon. Optimus Energy Solutions is out of Mount Dora, Florida, and we serve, there's a slide further, we work throughout all of the southeast United States and principally serve municipal entities as well as a multifamily sector. Of course, we sell and make a living off of selling charge point electric vehicle charging stations. If anything that I'm talking about, you have questions, just jump in. Or similarly, if it's redundant, just cut me off. That's, for me, is a discussion, educational. We travel, do site assessments, but mainly just focus on education on electric vehicle charging, rollout of EV charging, especially on the municipal side, and try to share information on how folks are doing that effectively or not effectively. So that's us, and ChargePoint is the OEM. They're the original equipment manufacturer. They're based here in the United States out of California. They have about 70 to 74% of the North American market for electric vehicle charging stations. The reason I'm here today is they are the approved vendor for the Sourcewell public procurement contract, which, there we go. Is the town familiar? Do you guys do much through Sourcewell at all? Is the council familiar? No. So Sourcewell is a public procurement program. It's actually it's an entity out of the state of Minnesota. They essentially pre-vet. They'll put out an RFP of sorts for charging stations or playground equipment or 100 other things that municipalities or public entities might purchase. Folks will obviously bid on that in a traditional RFP environment. They will vet them, and then member organizations such as the town of Fort Myers Beach or others that are signed up then have the privilege to purchase at those competitively bid contract rates and not have to do that themselves, basically preventing every town, every small municipality, every city, every county having to go through those procurement exercises, especially geared towards, I don't want to downplay what I do, but smaller type purchases, not the $400,000, go all of the building type of things. So a station such as this, which we'll get into the operation in a second, retails for $7,600, and I think the Sourcewell price is $6,300 or $6,200. The point is, not every entity has to go through that. So that I just put the ID of Fort Myers Beach at the top. It's for hardware and services that have been vetted and that is what the Sourcewell procurement is. That's what we do. Probably 90% of our public work on entities that we're currently, like right now in the moment, doing work with is the toll roads, Orange County, Pasco County, et cetera, amongst many others. So if there's anyone on the council that would like to understand more about how these entities procure through that program or otherwise, I'd happily just put you in touch, whether it's their transport folks or their procurement folks, if that's of interest to you guys to learn more about. But all of those entities that are listed up there, we are working with through this.
And just a quick question.
Please, Jim.
Thank you for being here this morning. I'm roughly familiar with FP&L service territory, but just so we can have a better understanding, which of these particular entities is in FP&L service territory? In other words, who did you go head-to-head with FP&L against and win that contract for?
So FP&L does have a part of Pasco. FP&L chose through their own, they received PSC permission, do their own 1,000 station, where they own the stations themselves, put them out in the field. Now that program is done, and they put them in whatever strategic corridors they chose. That also happened to be a charge point contract, so those 1,000 stations were charge point. Those went, FPL did a totally different program and Sourcewell. So I'm not answering your question. So.
No, you're getting close. As you present this morning, please, it'd be helpful to us for you to be mindful the fact that what you're presenting this morning would be competing against what the FP&L program that was presented to us earlier on Monday. So as you present, help us better understand the differences between the two and how yours might be better for Fort Myers Beach.
Sure. I'm really appreciative of you saying that because I didn't know that FPL was presenting as part of their program here, so that helps educate me. I had no concept of that. I came down a few months ago and met with met with Doug and walked all of the sites and offered him all of the Sourcewell information that he dug through, no pun intended, and then all of the site-specific electrical work as well to prep those sites. So I simply can't speak to the nature of what the FPL program would be with the town of Myers Beach. So I'm ignorant.
Maybe more just generally then, the advantages of working with an incumbent utility versus a private entity such as yourself.
So the reason folks work with, I can't speak to why someone would work with them, so I'll only speak to why folks work with us. So a town would purchase the stations, own that asset. I mean, you can lease them as well, but own that station, you control that service as a municipal service. You collect your revenue as a town from that station. A moneymaker. You really, the line that I use from statistics is besides the heaviest of heavy trafficked areas, what these stations do is it's a value add amenity that pays for itself over the life of that station. Maybe you get a little bit of back end the last 2.5, 3 years of revenue, but you're not filling the coffers with these. It's a value add amenity that's designed to service constituents, guests, visitors. In this case, in your case, it stands for itself. And then you control that asset versus a third party who can remove it, who can change the terms, it's on their terms, where basically they're just utilizing your land or your parking space for whatever. But again, I can't speak to their program here. I don't know what they would have presented.
It's fine. I just thought that'd be helpful.
It's very helpful. I had no idea. So the reason folks work with us is so that they can own and control however they wish to provision that amenity for whatever their goals are. And so in a case like yours, where it's public parking, paid parking, generally you're probably looking at charging $1.25 to $1.50 per hour on top of whatever the parking fees are. The use of a station like this, and that's per plug. So each of the stations that's proposed to be out there, you kind of see there, it has 2 plugs. And each station serves 2 parking spots and collects revenue through each of those. Having 75% of the market, essentially if you drive an electric vehicle, like I drove one down this morning from Mount Dora, you have the ChargePoint app. So there's no administration by the city. Basically, let's say the program is delegated, for example. There's a bit of front end admin where he would set up the portal for the town of Fort Myers Beach. Okay, here's our stations. You see power usage. You have any ESG reporting that you may or may not participate in, and all of your revenue metrics. And then you just have a dashboard like any other functional dashboard exists for different hardware, software services. And then there's no other revenue collection. I come up, I want to use the station, I hold my phone, it Bluetooths me in the welcome. The town charges you $1.50 an hour, collects money from my PayPal or my credit card, and then on a monthly basis remits those funds. charge point system. So the nice thing about these is besides the front end, decide how you want to set up the portal, decide your initial parameters, there's no other management. That's why I love these. I mean, all the stations that I personally own or our companies own, they're all charge point. It's the only one I'll sell, simply because once you set it up, it is be set and forget it. I'm going to change parameters if you want. Okay, we don't want to put 30 plugs out in our town. We think we want to limit our expenditure, whatever the case is. There's a really nice thing within this that it's really the only feature I talk extensively about, and that is you can do graduated pricing. Which I love pricing as a behavioral mechanism in any application. And so here, if you want to only put in 6 plugs or 8 plugs or whatever the town feels is appropriate, you say, fine, you, Mr. Driver, you can come and plug in for 4 hours for $1.50 an hour. Once you're into hour 5, it's $5 an hour or $10 an hour or whatever threshold you want to set, simply because then you're going to probably have a more democratized use of the asset versus someone just plugging in and sitting there all day.
Pricing, you're talking about price per hour, so it's per hour, not per watt hour?
You can charge either way. So under Florida statute, this is not deemed as selling electricity. It's deemed basically you're offering a service, and you can charge for that either per kilowatt hour or per hour. For all of our clients, besides a small niche that's not applicable here, I always recommend charging per hour. The reason I could leave here, go over to Publix, get my groceries, and come back to this station. If you charge me per kilowatt hour, plug in, and 32 cents, and stay there all day. But for me, it kind of defeats the purpose of having those stations out there for whatever goals you're trying to do. So I highly recommend charging per hour, because then if somebody does choose to sit there all day, it's inconsequential to you, because if that thing's full for 12 hours a day, you're going to have enough revenue to put in it.
And so there's like, we were told there were 3 different levels of charge, the old 110 volt, one that's like a 20-hour charge or something, and then there's a half an hour charge. So would this include the fast charge, the half an hour charge?
These stations are called level 2 charge. A microphone here?
Box in front of you there.
Found that out halfway through. Yes, level 1 is in an outlet. These are level 2 stations. On your average car is going to charge at 25 miles of range per hour. Every hour you're plugged in, you're getting about 25 miles of driving range. And then the DC fast charging stations, referencing, those are the ones you'll see along highways or at a Dunkin' Donuts or otherwise. And those are the ones that'll charge at 200-300 miles an hour, depending on what your car can receive. So much of charging speed is actually governed by what the cars can receive. They're designed to handle. So no, these are level 2 charging. DC fast charging is it charges a car at 5 or 6 times the speed. It's also under the Sourcewell program about 5 to 7 times as costly. And the other big thing is it runs off 480 volt power. So oftentimes you have to put a new transformer or step up transformer with significant electrical costs. Now, I'm not always saying in this case, like over at your Oak Street amenities area, you have pretty significant power because you have the pool things, etc. But if an average level 2 station, say $10,000 with services and warranty and other things, your average fast charger is $50,000-$60,000.
What size transformer does the level 2, this one, use?
These can run off of a single phase power source or a 3-phase 208, so they have a lot of flexibility. So in the cases of the areas we looked at a number of areas, Doug and I, but for example, the Newton House or behind the pool over on Oak Street, or here, you can just pull it off of a normal house panel inside, or in some cases, you can just drop an extra metered service next to an existing transformer. But the power requirements are much more easily accessible. It's level 2 stuff.
I asked the FP&L presenter the same question, so I'll ask you, is there a way that these can be, I guess it would be easier with this to retrofit it with a 110 outlet, to expand the amount of customers we could service versus the level 3? Is that a safe statement or no?
I don't know how FPL would expand these to have a normal 110 volt outlet. The original EV level 2 EV chargers, I say that 11 years ago, they were designed with a 110 outlet because many cars at that time, you had 20 or 30 mile battery. We don't see people use that anymore. They haven't been manufactured with a 110 volt outlet for about 6.5, 7 years. We can put, so for example, at Newton House, it's going to make more sense to just run a little sub panel off of the main panel inside, out underneath that walk path to the parking lot. And we're going to put a 100 amp sub panel there, so you just drop a 110 volt outlet next to that for bucks or whatever the case is. But the stations themselves don't have that integrated, and I'm not aware of one that does. I can be educated, but I'm not aware of one.
You answered my question.
Right. So, I mean, I said who we are. That's us. We work throughout all the Southeast. I only put that we are the largest simply to show that we are able and capable of serving entities. Otherwise, it's not really consequential. And then just looking at your specific situation, thinking in terms of about 380 parking spots, municipal parking spaces, electric vehicle penetration. I can't speak to your exact area, so I'm not going to misquote, especially on the record. But penetration market-wise is about 3%. Let's say it's 5% in more affluent areas like this. You would be looking at on 380 arguments for a whole bunch of different parking spots. The approach I take, because the data is so good through the portal, it starts small, put a few stations out there in areas that make a lot of sense, charge a reasonable rate, and spend 3 or 6 months gathering the data, or whatever seasons you wish to see that data through, and just let the data inform, the usage data inform what resources are available to expand or what the demand is. We're working with USF right now, not too far away from here, and they've got 29 plugs. 14 of those plugs are at 100% capacity for certain periods of day. So it's very easy. We're going back to the committee and saying, here's the use. So it makes all the sense. So I prefer to shoot smaller, especially in the municipal side, just because there are certain stakeholders that rightly ask for data or backup or rationale for decisions. And so after a number of months, you have that usage and say, hey, these are used 6, 7, 8 hours a day. You can make a strong argument either way. That's the approach we take. I'm not saying it's the right one. That's just the approach that we take. That's the approach I spoke to Doug about, that I would just be walking through or presenting today. And then your basic, I was high actually, your basic Sourcewell type proposal is there on the right-hand side. You have the station at the top. You have the connectivity. So the nice thing about these is they all work off cell phone reception. You don't have to run low voltage of any kind. That's what that connectivity is, and that's charged per plug. You can see I put Sourcewell at the end of each one, come off of that contract. Item number 3 is certainly optional. It's still a Sourcewell price. That's a 5-year warranty. About 80% of the stations we sell are bought with that, but it's completely optional. It's basically says, we're going to buy the station. We want it as an amenity. We'll collect the revenue. But if anything goes wrong, we don't want to have to hassle with it. We don't have the manpower, the personnel. And so that puts that onus either on Optimus Energy or on ChargePoint that has their own certified operations and maintenance partners. And then line 4 is based on site visits, what the requisite power, electrical work. And then site work would be painting parking spots, putting up the Florida statute signage if the city desires it, which is on page 2 of a lot of these that are circulated. So that's really the standard looking proposal that's been out there.
So to be clear, that's a per 2 parking spots, so that's per.
Exactly.
Can't see that. Ben, what's the bottom line on that?
17,700.
$17,700 per
$17,700.
unit.
2 spots.
2.
In this case, the logistics fee, since this was quoted beginning of January, the logistics fee's technically gone away. We'd have to re-quote it, so it's going to be slightly less, but call it 17.5 for the sake of discussion. This specific one, the price on lines 1 through 3 is identical for anyone we work with throughout the country in Sourcewell. Line 4 obviously is completely site dependent, so we just try to find the sites that are either going to get the highest use or the least amount of electrical cost. Much more scientific than that to minimize your electrical cost.
Benjamin, you had made a comment about the rate of return and potentially seeing some money on the back end above what you pay for it. What is that average rate of return? Do you know yet? Has it been around long enough for you to determine the life expectancy, one of these units, and your rate of return?
Yeah, so ChargePoint kind of has, it's a stupid joke, but I do use it because it's applicable to that, to the answer to the question, Dan, and that is, they say they're a 12-year-old company and a 6-year-old. And that's about right, because of just how much this has accelerated over the last 6 years. Stations that I personally own that we've consulted with ChargePoint on, we put an 8-year lifespan into our model. I think that's reasonable. The underlying technology from an obsolescence standpoint, I'll answer your question in 3 ways. From an obsolescence standpoint, is really not applicable in this case versus almost all other technologies by 2 reasons. One, the software is completely controlled by over-the-air updates and technology, so you have this connectivity that you're paying to ChargePoint. There's no way while you're paying that connectivity that they can't upgrade, update the station security-wise, feature-wise. The software is constantly upgraded through what you're paying for. From a hardware perspective, level 2 charging back from 12 years ago has not changed. It's all governed by the distribution of electricity, which obviously a decade. So a question I get often is not only on the lifespan, but hey, what happens when these get so much better? Due to power constraints and other things, this is pretty much the level 2. There are now, these run off 40 amp breakers. Some people in their homes or condos put them on 50 amp breakers, which are slightly faster. But then you really quickly get into power constraints, 100 amp panel, 125 amp. 8 years, I think, is reasonable. That's what we see out in the field as long as they're not abused. And in case a lot of these places have cameras, other things. I say 8 years. And the reason that I say on the back end you get a little bit of a financial kicker is the station should pay for itself in about 5.5 years, based on what we've observed.
So, Ben, one of the things I've been thinking about as we analyze both proposals is initially I was intrigued by FP&L because it would in essence shift the risk all to FP&L. They're subject matter experts, the incumbent utility. They've got a formal plan, there's no cost, and they basically take care of everything. Then they tell us that they've got a 10-year contract. In that contract, there's no pledge to upgrade technology should, technology emerge or evolve as it is, but you just sort of disprove that on at least on a piece of it. So we're wrestling with, or I'm wrestling with this concept of shifting risk, and FP&L proposals seem very appealing in that respect. Your thoughts on that concept versus your company and versus an incumbent utility where we're actually within their service territory? You sort of danced around that, not danced around, I don't mean that negatively, but you touched on it before, but can you get into that a little bit more? Because it seems very appealing. You have FP&L, subject matter experts, they're here, they're on location, they're heavily regulated. It seems safe. Do you want to just give us the counter argument to that, if you can?
So if we had an hour and a half and we worked on the record and we could talk sort of interesting PSC and regulatory things, there would be a lot of layers to that onion
Yes.
that you just dropped out there.
I'm interested in those
And
layers.
that I think would be great discussions, Jim, maybe over a whiskey or otherwise. For the purposes, though, of being serious about how the town approaches something like this, it's not binary, but it is principally you can outsource it to a third. I mean, heck, like City of Sanford that was listed up there, I own the station. Their stuff, I said, fine, I'll upgrade it. Here's an pay me, I collect the revenue, and I do that. So it's more so. I wouldn't say FPL is an folks like myself learning, designing, and implementing solutions, oftentimes with large scale solutions, trying to roll these things out. Nothing wrong with that, but I think it's dangerous for someone, especially or are heavily regulated. That would be my caution there. From a decision standpoint, I'm not going to try to sell or be highfalutin about it. It's town, really, because I didn't know, does the town wish to control and collect revenue and have the data on these things, be able to talk to their constituents? FPL runs it, you're not gonna get any. Going to have a look through to more, basically going to be if FPL wants to add more, they're going to add more. If not, you have what you have. Or you could come back and supplement and buy more and they didn't. I think you hit the nail on the head. That do you want to collect revenue and control your destiny, or do you want to abdicate that responsibility to a party and say we don't, so whatever happens, happens? I find you. Things in
I appreciate that. That's very helpful.
One of the things that I remember, Jim, based on what you were just saying, is you kept saying it doesn't make sense to us. We were asking about other locations. We looked at that, it didn't make sense to us. Is it about them or is it about, you know? I'm glad you asked that question.
And there's some other points to that too. Do we need level, you know, the fast charging? I mean, is that really, is someone going to come here to the beach and, you know, want a half an hour charge? Or were they going to be going to the beach? One thing that's,
That would require the over and above investment in
right,
transformers and.
is
all
that,
sorts.
is that necessary? But one thing that's kind of interesting is the idea of just charging per hour. Now, we already have some parking spots, particularly like the one that you don't have underlined there in Old San Carlos. You already have an application that charges for parking. So the way I see it is this, you could actually roll that parking fee into this, right, for those locations. Or we could, is there a way we could just have our parking fee higher on charge station locations? And then the charge is in that fee. We don't have, I mean, how could you run this without having charged for the station? You know what I mean?
you absolutely could, but then if you tried to charge a different rate for, say, electric vehicle, you would have to have a pretty strong mechanism. Rate broke, not that they're parked in. I'm sure you would. Decide if one in these states probably recommend. I don't know. I'm just talking out loud.
If we like, I mean, we could program whatever the hourly rate for any one of the stations independently. And is there like, I don't know, we pay for our parking app, but if we roll our parking, then are we getting hit with more overhead for that fee? I mean, is there like a percentage of
Yeah,
commission and things?
if you roll non-charging, like I said, $5 an hour for parking, for example, if you roll that into, or $5, whatever it is that what it is?
$5 an hour, yeah.
Thanks, yeah. And then yes, you would be hit with charge point, credit card fees, security fees, et cetera, on that $5 additional. So if you're really looking to optimize your revenue, you would only wish to run the fees through charge point that you have wished to associate with the service of EV charging.
You know, the 2 hour maximum parking, potentially we could look at raising, just in these spots, the amount of hours they could park there if they were going to be paying for the electricity to charge your car. And you said these are what, 25 miles per?
Yeah, 25 miles per hour. And your average charge session, I'm talking, this is the objective, subjective line, right? We have certain data, but not in the town of Fort Myers. It's probably going to be 3 to 4 hours. Now, that doesn't include the folks that are going to just charge there to go to Publix or something like that. But a lot of these have been in the old San Carlos. And I didn't put that on there because Doug was unable prior to this meeting to determine certain routing of conduit because I just didn't want to come in and say, hey, it's going to be 25 grand to set all this new stuff if you had it. So that's why that one wasn't on. But you're probably going to see 3 to 4 hours in your use case. And that's going to give someone, 100 miles if they come from ways. Interesting, somebody asked about the DC fast. Did FPL suggest that maybe that would be an amenity that they would add here in the town, the fast charger?
They told us that's what they were gonna do.
And so the fast charger as a product, they're going to be charging plus or minus probably about 35 cents a minute is kind of the going rate to use the fast charger. And so fast charger works great for people like me that drive 4 hours for this meeting. I'll stop in Bartow, stop at the mall, whatever it is, up at 75, grab a coffee and then go do my thing. And here you would just probably have people, if a fast charger was the way that it went, I would come, if I was going to the beach, I'd plug in for the first 30 minutes, get full, and then go and move my car, somewhere else. But it's a very different product. They're very different products. The level 2 charging is designed for places where people are parked for more extensive periods of time. Multifamily, municipal, hospitality, a lot of the, it's this discussion, but it is different.
But essentially, just trying to figure the math out. So essentially with those fast chargers, you said 35 cents per minute? Charge for a 30-minute charge. What's the parking?
Oh, yeah, if you're charging that parking, yeah. But they are distributed depending on what configuration, and much better now, Amy. Depending on what configuration your car is, what configuration they set it up. I mean, you could theoretically get 100, 150 miles of range, 30 minutes. It really is just a very different, and we sell it in some. I mean, we're doing a fast chargers in Sarasota right now for BMW. It's just a whole different ball of wax than what Doug and I had met about, and then what the power constraints are currently on site, et cetera.
You could mix and match too, right? You could put
That's the
the
best
fast
model.
charge somewhere else and the regular ones over here.
Put a fast charger somewhere. In this case, it's somewhat easy because you got one in, one off. Somewhere like an old San Carlos, for example, because you have a couple of transformers there. I don't remember what their voltage was. You put a fast charger there, and then you could sprinkle level 2 throughout. And the gentleman that I work most closely with at ChargePoint, who's head of the Southeast for ChargePoint, his name's Jeff. He's based in Fort Lauderdale. We have, through our years of research, we have settled on basically, Ray, kind of what you're intimating is. The market is kind of obsessed with fast charging because it sounds great. Oh, the faster you distribute power, it's like a gas station, et cetera. When really, statistically, based on how cars are charged, the right mix is limited fast charging on corridors, maybe along an entry and exit, and then as much democratized level 2 charging as you can. 80% of the charging of cars, it's exactly like a cell phone. 80% happens at home or work, or in this case, hybrid work, whatever the case might be. Obviously, that 20%, when you need it, you really need it. So the more level 2 stations that are out there, I mean, it's just, you park somewhere and you plug in. It's just what you do. So there's wisdom in comment specifically effectively placed limited DC fast charging with as much democratized level 2 charging as people are comfortable with. It seems to be most client, using a broad term, client friendly solution, folks think.
I would just say this morning, Ben, you have disproved the theory that incumbent utilities are the only people with subject matter experts. You clearly have a extensive background in this, and your candor has been much appreciated this morning.
You guys, great questions. No, it's great questions. I love this stuff. It's fun. And the thing for me is electrified transport, the domestic value, obviously we live in the U.S., so for the U.S., but the domestic value proposition for electrified transportation is so phenomenal. And of course, in our case, more things we produce locally and consume locally. Fun for me. So I appreciate you guys. It's great. Thanks for having me.
Benjamin, I have one final question, if you don't mind, real quick.
Yeah.
Say you go with the level 2 charger, and I understand that the transformers are different and all of that. But you find that there's a value of changing it from a 2 to a 3 in that location and maybe repurposing that somewhere else. Other than the transformer, is there anything else underground that would need to be changed to upgrade it to the level 3?
Pretty significantly because of the number of wires, the size of the wires, It is a totally, excuse me, it's a totally different make-ready package. For example, the concrete pad on these is going to be 18 by 18 or 24 by 24, and the concrete pad on the DC fast charger with the template is going to be 4 feet by 3 feet, and it's going to have different and then it's a very different. It would not be just upgrade the transformer and swap and play. Kind of to your question, Dan, it would be more extensive. It would be basically a redo. Of course, you could use the station elsewhere.
It would still serve 2 spots, just like the
DC fast charger only serves 1 spot at a time. It has 2 plugs on it, but those 2 plugs are because of the different connectors, the CCSS and the CHAdeMO. But it only serves 1 car at a time.
And what's an equivalent price for a level 3 compared to this?
Your average DC fast charger under Sourcewell, the charger itself is about 40 grand, plus or minus. And then the services, let's just make up a figure, layer on another 15,000. And our average make-ready work right now on the fast chargers that we're participating in is anywhere from 15 to 40,000, depending on a lot of things, and that's assuming an upgraded transformer. So, I mean, on that math, I just threw out a 70,000. Obviously, you don't have the sales tax on it, which is helpful. Use that as kind of a notional amount.
That's for a single charge at a time.
Yes, sir.
And you've certainly given us a lot to think about, and it reminds me of commercial real estate, the rent versus own analysis. This is quite the counterpoint to our presentation the other day from FP&L. So it's a numbers thing, and
I'm glad that it was helpful.
yeah, it was very
Cool.
very helpful, and we'll be talking about this a lot more in the weeks to come, months to come. But we appreciate you coming down and giving us this education on these machines. And maybe one day when we're up Mount Dora way, we'll stop in and say hello. That's another beautiful part of the state up there.
It is 110 feet in my house.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Bring your oxygen.
High and dry in Mount Dora.
Exactly, yeah. No, this is great, and unrelated in any way to sales. Obviously, I gave you my card just for my name and otherwise. But if the town has questions on this, obviously I've communicated, just reach out. I mean, that's what we do. We're a resource, and ultimately you're going to decide whatever's best for you and your town. But if you have questions, just reach out to us, and we'll try to share as unbiased info. But no matter what, if you do go electric vehicle charging through us with FPL, you really are going to be best served using the ChargePoint product. It's the standard, it's the gold standard, and for a very limited premium, almost no premium under the Sourcewell. That's my one sort of sales comment, is to be best served with that.
Which point?
Did you give everybody a card?
I didn't. Amy asked for it
Have it,
but
I'll
I
share.
brought, she asked for one, I brought a whole stack.
Beautiful. If you could leave that would be great.
All right, very good.
And
Thanks.
Is this presentation that you gave us, is that available as a handout? We can do that. Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. You're always on the ball there.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Very much.
Much, Ben.
Thank you. Very
Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's fun. Thanks.
Okay. Where are you charging up before you go home?
I'm gonna go to Stu Motorcycle, because they sell go ride and I bought one of the first ride.
It's a touchy subject around here. You might not want to say those words.
Electric bicycle.
Bike.
Electric bike.
Electric motorcycle.
Yeah, right.
So now I'll go up to the mall. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care. All right. We'll go right into the next one. The next one is our lighting presentation by our friends at DRMP Inc. Gentlemen.
Hello, for the
Hello.
record, Paul Benvey, project manager with the RMP
Paul.
for 3 projects that we're working on. Real quick, Chelsea just wanted me to give you a quick, brief update on where we're standing with the 3 projects, and then we'll go into the lighting aspect. This is probably gonna be a little bit more of an answer, question and answer than an update. I mean, we're pretty much status quo from the last meeting. We're making progress, but we're getting held up in permitting and things. Bay Oaks, we'll talk about Bay Oaks real quick. The first thing that you can see out there is the schools portion has started construction. Some paving in the parking lot's been done, some demolition, fence has been put in, and the parking structure has been put in as well. I think we got the whole presentation in here. Oh, no worries. We can talk about it here. Here we go. So right now, I believe the last phase is the playground. That's going to take about 4 to 6 weeks to install. So we're going to start that in summer break. So that project is moving along. Yes.
Chelsea, do you mind going up and being a pointer while Paul's, thank you, Vanna. Okay.
I don't know if you can. Yeah. There. That's the where the playground's going.
I'm sorry.
The sidewalk is in. I believe this one has been canceled for whatever reason. They wanted more green space, so that one's not going in. The rest of it is moving along. So that's your
What's the
first.
others? Paul, what's the other square to the left of the playground?
This is an existing sports. It was an old basketball, and we shortened it and cut off to the square, left that alone, and then we're restriping that for Foursquare and hopscotch and things like that. Bay Oaks, or the Estero parcel, which is down here, we are starting that. We are going through the final stages of permitting on that. We are working with Lee County DOT for the connection permit at the sidewalk that's being put in along School Street, and then also this driveway that will be put in here as well. There's a crosswalk that exists there. There's just some minor things we got to clean up in that area. And speaking with their project manager, it looks like there's a whoop-de-doo from a manhole, from a sanitary manhole. They're also going to try and correct that at the same time. So extra benefit there. And that area there, if you remember, will be the National Fitness equipment is in there. That's what it looks like. You guys already own this, and we're putting in the concrete pad to house it. So that's where we stand there.
Paul?
Yes.
I love this concept, but help me understand how it's going to, what part will face Estero? What will be the back? What will be the side? How will it work?
So I believe where we're standing right now is this wall will go north-south, correct? On the west side. So that wall will be here. So pedestrians will be able to walk in on the sidewalk here and access that from that side.
Thank you.
Paul, while we're there, the cab committee has asked us, you see the 3 parking spots just north of, or I guess that's that. They would like to do something there in the future and asked us about those 3 parking spots. Our recommendation is we go forward and put the parking spots in for now, and then at some future date, if there's an amenity that everyone agrees to that should go there in its place, we'll put it in if everyone agrees at that point in time. But for now, it would be beneficial to have 3 parking spots for people who want to drive and use the fitness court, not to have relatively close proximity parking.
Thank you, Roger. Could you just point to that, Paul, where those spots are?
Yeah, these are the 3 spots that are going to be part of this initial project.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yep.
Well,
I like
any of
that idea, Roger. Yep.
Will any of those are they just going to be standard parking, or will there be any handicap parking in those?
So those will be standard stalls. Handicap stall.
On that, you can just see
Right
at the
here.
very top of the.
Oh, I see, okay. It's behind the pole. I'm going to do this deal.
So then that brings us to the rest of the park. We are tied up in permitting right now with South Florida Water Management District. I don't want to go into too many details, but our pre-application meeting that we had with them did not yield the results that we were looking for when we actually submitted our permit. So there's a hang up there where we're going to be attenuating the flow. Normally, because this drains directly into a tidal body of water, it's free flow. And that was what we discussed in our 2 pre-application meetings, and then when we submitted our permit, they asked us to now attenuate the flow, which means hold back some of the water and slowly release it body of water. So we're dealing with that now. That's it's going to be working on that, and we should have the modeling wrapped up by Friday, and we plan on submitting on Monday of next week.
You'll have to like make some kind of berm around the property or
Well,
something?
there definitely has to be a berm anyway. It has to be controlled, but we were looking to free flow off, and now when you have to stage that water up, you have to create more volume to handle it. So it's just it's a hiccup, and we're working through it. Any other questions on Bay Oaks? Let's see, we can talk about the
I would
building a
just
little
say,
bit here.
Paul, I received a note from a constituent on that fitness center, which is spectacular. But just a word of warning, the one that, I think they've experienced one in another part of Florida, they said it's very susceptible to corrosion issues from the ocean, being near the ocean. I know that's a challenge everywhere on the beach, but anything you could do, coatings, whatever, to help on the front side to be preventative on that front might be advisable, because they said it's a great facility, but very susceptible to.
So I would say, number one, that stuff was bought before we were involved with the project, so you guys already own it, and it's in storage right now. I would say if you want to prevent that, preventative maintenance would be there. So coming out, inspecting, looking for rust, wire brushing the rust off and repainting, pretty much you're going to be keeping up with it.
Okay.
Just to be clear, so we received the grant, which basically provided for that equipment to us, as is. So,
No, I appreciate that. I didn't know if
Yeah,
there was,
so, I
I didn't know if there was coatings you could spray on it or.
can to, keep it, extend its service life and maintain it as well as we possibly can, given the fact that we didn't have any say as
Oh,
to.
no, I get that,
how
Raj.
it was
I
put
just didn't know if
together.
sometimes you can spray coatings on these things to help slow the erosion.
Our team is pretty familiar with, rust prevention. We'll take care of it as best we can.
All good.
Floor plan really hasn't changed at all. We're going through some minor tweaks. We're putting outlets and water fixtures and things like that, so nothing major going on there. If you have any questions about that, Ryan is here to discuss. Pretty much the same footprint facade as we've seen in the past. This is just a rendering. It's the same rendering we've been presenting for a while, so no new changes here. And just a reminder of kind of what we're looking to get as a finished product. Any other questions with Bay Oaks?
So just
That's
to be,
90%?
yeah, so the plans are at 90%. Anyone wants to look at the engineering, the detailed architectural drawings and stuff, they're available. Chelsea has a set and I have a set. Want to page through the 100 so pages. Really, we're just looking at sort of operational convenience at this point. Is it better for the door to swing from the left to from the right, in or out, where possible, just for operational convenience, those types of things? But other than that, it's pretty much on its way.
And so maybe talk a little bit about schedule. We're looking for that South Florida permit, the ERP permit, in the next 60 days or so. So once that's locked and loaded, we'll be ready to bid this thing for construction this summer, right out of season.
At this point, we really have 2 simultaneous projects going on at the same time with the Bayside and Bay, various stages.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the
Actual
actual, well, we're hoping that by the time we receive bids, council awards them, contractor mobilizes and actually breaks ground at Bay Oaks, Bayside will be pretty wrapped up. The demolition is basically complete. At this point, I don't know if anyone's been down there, of the existing things that had to be relocated to be added away of the new project, so that's done. And new work, if you will, is starting. Age of Bayside Park, which I'm sure Paul will get
Yeah,
into.
we'll get into Bayside Park in a minute, but
When is that groundbreaking? Did I miss that?
yes. It's got the construction fence up right now. Demo is almost complete, if not yet. I spoke with the contractor, last night and mentioned that he would estimate he's about 5% complete on his construction schedule. But he is looking to be substantially complete by. So it's a small project, should be wrapped up shortly.
So back to this, this fitness court. So we're gonna lay down a cement pad for that.
Yes.
And we don't really know what the lifetime of that court is gonna be, how long the service life is gonna be, if it's subject to corrosion. So if that becomes inoperable, then we're left with a pad.
Well, we would look for then another grant, replace that with whatever the next generation would be.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we would try to find something with a similar footprint and all of that. We'll deal with that in that time, but no, our estimate is that, we should get a good 5 years plus out of service life out of the thing.
We pickleball one day, Bill.
That's the standard pickleball size. It's kind of an odd place for a pickleball court.
It'll be everywhere.
So Times Square, I believe we were right around 100% last time we met in October. So right now we're working with FDOT for the grant funds that go along with that and their review process to make sure that these meet their standards. There's a little bit of a process there with trying to bifurcate the project. Normally you wouldn't split a project in half vertically, but that's, this is a FDOT funded project that, again, it's $1 million grant for the pavers. In order to not federalize the entire project, which means you have to have a CEI out there inspecting every single piece. It's all by America, Davis-Bacon wages and things like that, to try and split those out and not end up costing more money than you would get from the grant. We split it such that everything underground up to the pavers would be paid for out of that $1 million grant, and then everything above that would be the town's contribution to the project. So we little nitpicky things through there. We're working on.
Paul, on that point,
yes.
or an unrelated point, but related, so we have a $1 million grant for the underground pavers. And do you have a sense yet, Roger, or you guys, what percent or how much will be able to utilize the COVID dollars to offset some of the costs of this particular project?
Right, so we don't have a schedule of values yet for this project, but we will, once we do, we'll be able to see how that will interface with grant and our work that we're paying for out of pocket.
Thank you.
Yeah, so right now we're just working on some contractual issues with the FDOT on what they will allow the town to do in terms of its bidding and contracting this out. Our goal is to have the same contractor run DOT project phases and the town project phases. This way you don't have finger pointing, potentially can condense the schedule, and things like that. So we're working on that with Chelsea and some other consultants and the FDOT. So here's your approximate schedule. That funding is not available until July. And so that's why we're having here, like the earliest start would be in August.
So, but the water and wastewater work would be done in that first phase, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
All the underground up to the finished walking surface.
That's probably gonna be the biggest disruption of Times Square will be, because everything will be torn up.
It will. So this is where there's some minutia that we can talk about, where if you have foundations in the ground that are waiting for structures to go on them, keep the whole thing closed? Do we try to keep a pedestrian walkway through? Do we try to open it up to the public while we're trying to install vertical structures? There's lots of things to think about there, and it's minutia, but it's things to. And we want to keep this thing under construction for as little duration as possible. We don't want to disrupt 2 years worth of time But at the same time, we got to think about maintenance of pedestrian traffic and safety and like that. So, that first portion, for example, we're going to talk about the lighting in a minute, but that first portion does not include lighting. So if you open it up to the public and there's no lighting, that's a safety concern. So, all little issues to talk about there. Bayside Park. So we talked about it. We went under construction, I think like the first or second week of January. Fence is up, pavers are up. Is the pergola or the pavilion down? So moving along there. Remember, this is kind of what we're looking at. This is again an old rendering. I mean, renderings a little bit of time and effort to fix. Basically, the main change from this rendering to what you'll be getting, that monument sign is switched to the other side of the park. Other than that, it looks very similar to what you see here. This is the submittal that was sent from the shade sail manufacturer. You can see we've canted the poles. We've given a little more vertical play with the way those shade sails work. And then those shade sails have all been picked out to match the palette that and if you see in the very back, there is a shade sail that is shaped like a pentagon or a parallelogram. That's lack of a better term, a stage, but it's just meant to be there as shade for normal folks. But then if you have a concert or something like that, it also kind of doubles as that as well. So
The decking is not raised there at all.
there is a 2 steps up to it, but it meets around it. It's kind of complicated. We kind of brought it up so that you can have ADA directly across it. So the ADA path would be on the outside on this sidewalk here, and actually underneath it, down through here. And there's only 2 steps right here. So we've worked grading to make it gradual slopes around it, and then create a 2-step at the top so you have a little bit of elevation for if you had a performance.
The stage is at a bit of an angle, and then is there excavation on the front of the stage then too?
Basically, the majority of the park remains at existing grade. We did add some crowning to it to allow water to sheet off of it. The stage is brought up, but we've created a ramp, actually a ramp that goes from here to here.
I see, okay.
So the ramp is on this side, and then there is a drop off between. Sorry, I'm not doing anything. Can I walk over here and just point?
Don't talk, just point.
Don't talk.
The first part I pointed to is the concrete stage. That is about 6 inches to a foot higher than the walkway behind it. And we're using the seat wall. There's a seat wall that's put back there to create almost like a retaining wall that has an elevation difference of a foot. That way it picks up some of that, the slope. So in order to make it elevated, we had to massage it in there.
Let me see if I can help you.
Yeah.
So to be able to maintain the ADA required slope, instead of starting right at the base of the stage, they've extended it back towards the sidewalk. So the ramp actually is a gradual ramp from the sidewalk upward towards the stage.
I get it.
It's feathered.
It is, yes. And again, that's another rendering of it, and we are going to go into lighting now.
But just before you do that, so there's just one little piece of business. I didn't want to interrupt Paul's presentation any more than necessary, and I didn't want to confuse the 2 grants. For Bay Oaks, we have another $1 million grant. I don't want to get it confused because of the same amount for the 2 different grants. That $1 million grant for Bay Oaks, we received notice of award, and we shared that with the council approximately a month or so ago. We actually received the grant paperwork to execute on Tuesday. John and Victor have been through that paperwork, and I understand as of last night, they're okay with it. It's ready to be executed. With your indulgence, I will execute that and bring that back for your official approval as a ratification item at the first meeting in March, if that's okay with all of you.
Okay, so, part of us looking at all these projects has been trying to bring continuity and sign language of the island, and so this is lighting. Okay, all right, so we've got Bill Schneider, correct? Yep, Sesco. Matt Horton with Insight, and Ryan Richards from RG Architects. Oh, and Suzanne is also on Zoom as well. Pardon me, I don't know her last name. Langsford with Town Lighting? Yes. Okay. So we've got some experts on lighting. We've got the manufacturer that's supplying the lights that we're going to be putting out here. We've got the landscape architect that's going to talk about lighting wavelengths, the turtle-friendly lights, and everything that goes on here. These are pretty complicated, and I think the goal here really is to show the lights that we've selected meet the intent of the code. And we're going to go line item by your code to show you how this works. So I'm going to let Matt come up here. I'm going to stand here with you. Sure.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, Matt Horton, principal with Insight. We've been on this design team since the very beginning, right? 2000. We started in concept phase. Really want to demonstrate for you today how we've met the lighting standards, Chapter 34, in terms of the fixtures, how they perform. Also met the intent of Chapter 32, Article 5, conservation. Point out, of course, that all of this lighting, because these projects are within the town right of way, all of the lighting is controlled by the town of Fort Myers Beach. Also going to show how, or demonstrate how we've been consistent from the conceptual phases back in 2019 through drawing phase, and really excited that we're this project's going the ground. I'll break this down into two categories, break the lighting into two categories. First is site lighting, and that you would liken to a street light. Purpose of site lighting is safety and welfare of the public moving through space. Second piece of the lighting design is landscape lighting. I'm going to group it all into landscape lighting, but it is essentially decorative element lighting for architectural features. Start with Chapter 34, and this is the section of code, Division 20, the lighting standards. This is what guides fixture standards for all of the lighting. Here is our street light, area light, pole light. Site lighting is in this category. This is the chosen fixture. It has been pretty consistent all the way from concept through construction drawings that this style is what was desired by the merchants groups and ultimately by council. This particular fixture is capable of providing or producing two wavelengths of light, and I will get into that in more detail. But this is the fixture we're talking about. To note that stylistically, design-wise, matches really well with the balance of the light furnishings. All of these projects, colors repeat. The design intent was create the certain elements of the gumbo limbo tree. So that being out here at the beach, so a lot of times that gumbo tree is kind of off center and really fit with that theme. So, starting with exemptions in Division 20, lighting for public roads are generally exempt. Okay, I'm just pointing this out because it's in there. We don't intend to use this exemption. Intent is to do the right thing. Rest of the code, though, we could easily say that projects are in public right-of-way, streets, and therefore they are exempt. We are going to meet balance of this code.
So I have a question on that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you usually, even though they are part of a public right-of-way, there's no automobile traffic on it. I mean, it seems to me that a street pays automobiles as opposed to,
The definition is very subjective. So we can argue that there's pedestrian traffic or walkers, bikers, rollerblading, any form of human movement defines a street. Again, we're not using that.
Yeah, we're not
I just-
relying on that.
Yeah, we're not
okay,
relying.
but you kind of brought it up, and I just want to say, it seems
Yeah,
like,
no, absolutely.
I mean, the illumination requirements from a conceptual, to me, from a conceptual standpoint, is if you have vehicle, bicycle, pedestrian interaction, then you need more illumination than you would on a pedestrian,
Yeah, let's be technically accurate too. So clearly, Times Square area was a street, it's a town right of way, so it is, for all intents and purposes, a street. Bayside Park area is a street. Using it for a different public purpose, but it is a street. Bay Oaks is not a street, it is a public area. They're technically,
Which is why meeting the technical standards for the fixtures anyway that are intended for outdoor spaces. The first piece we look at is illumination. That's essentially what this lighting fixture puts out in terms of the light, where it goes. Illuminance is measured in foot candles. According to the table in the code, for projects that are very much like this, municipal projects, there's a minimum of 0.8 foot candles throughout the site for safety's sake. Maximum average is 3 foot candles. Here we're looking at the Photometrics plan for Bayside Park. I use this as an example because it's pretty consistent. Bayside Park and Times Square. So the image on the left, where's the point? Image on the left, this is clarification. This is a repeat of two site plans for the park. Here's the right of way, the left and the right side. Reason for the two images, as you saw before, white lights are capable of putting out 3K, which is white light, and 590 nanometers light, which is long wavelength. And
When you change that, how does that affect the foot candles?
good question. The 3K light, which is on the left, slightly brighter at the minimum, and then the maximum average is slightly brighter, but we're still within the range of minimum and maximum for this type of public space. To for light, the long wavelength light, slightly lower in foot candles, but it hits all the minimums. We still have public safety in mind. The amber light's on, so we start there. light is slightly brighter for the balance of time that would be out of turtle nest.
So was there more fixtures required to achieve that goal to fit both minimums?
Weren't. Quiet guy to do this. Second part of this, the standards for lighting has to deal with these things I have highlighted here. Essentially, fixture has to be fully shielded, which means that you can't see the optic from certain angles standing outside of where the optic is. It has to be full cutoff, which means it throws light only in a specific cone. Recessed bulbs doesn't really apply. We have an LED array, so this is kind of a function of code that probably could use some updating to recognize LED technology. But the LED board is recessed into the hood of this fixture. Flat lenses, of course, and that again is so light isn't being scattered. Okay, so shielded, there's the definition under section 34, definition of shielded. We've provided two pieces of shielding here. One is built into the fixture itself, and we see this here. LED board, which is here in white, slightly recessed. That's the first part of the shielding that we've provided. Second, this is additional shielding, and this will be on all of the fixtures that are in Times Square. This is additional turtle safe shielding. There is whether the fixture is on the opposite side of Times Square from where it might be visible from the beach. We want to play it safe. That shielding for all of the fixtures. LED array again. Flat lens. Next piece, here's the definition for what cutoff means. And here are cut sheets from the manufacturer that demonstrate that this is indeed a cutoff fixture. All of these values are 0, if you could see. And this diagram, and Bill is much better explaining this than I am. This is what they call the bug diagram. Yeah, come on up, please.
Good morning, everyone. Bill Snyder with Sesco Lighting. Basically, this is a representation of the bug classification. Bug is an acronym for backlight, uplight, and glare. And so to demonstrate that there's a 0 uplight component, which makes it a full cutoff, the U value in the bug has to be 0. So basically, that's no light above the 90-degree line there on the graph to the right.
And this is specific for the lights we were just talking about, the street lights.
This is the actual bug rating of the luminaire that is selected for the projects.
Okay. There are multiple luminaires, right? This is not the only one.
The pedestrian post.
Okay. Right.
This is this first section, as I mentioned before, we kind of broke lighting down into site lighting, lights, landscape level, which is where we go next. This is the specification sheet from Times Square. This includes all of the proposed landscape lighting for the project. Have a second. I'll explain more about what those exactly are and what their functions are in a second. In terms of landscape lighting, go to technical standards section of Chapter 34, luminaire standards. And what we covered before for the site lighting is that they have to be fully shielded, full cutoff, recessed bulb, flat lenses. There are exceptions. And right here in the code, specific standards, and then your standards again, letter F. Fixtures used to accent architectural features. There's landscaping, art, are acceptable such that the lighting is directed only onto those features and it's aimed or shielded to all of the landscape lighting proposed either has internal shielding, they're all aimable, and they are all directed onto an object, whether it be a tree, column, or some other architectural feature.
Also, it says to avoid shining light into the night sky.
Yes. So in the orange circle, this is, and again, it's only for Times Square, a gobo projector, and the purpose of that is that would be mounted high on a pole and projecting an image down onto the ground. Could advertise logo or certain events. 3 fixtures in the blue circle. Those are your in-grade fixtures, and those internally are shielded and are able to be aimed onto an object. First 2 on the left are essentially the same fixture, they just have a different application. One of them is intended to sit in tree grates and shine onto the trees. There is meant to sit in the paving areas and shine up onto columns that hold the shade sails.
These are RGB lights?
They're all full spectrum RGBW. To note that they're fully dimmable. If there is a concern with brightness, or ability of the fixtures to be bright, they can be dimmed down. And I'll talk about kind of lighting recipes, if you will, later on. Gray, the gray circle at the bottom, is a very specific fixture. It's also RGBW. That is intended for the series of seat walls that we have designed for the projects. And that will, if you can imagine kitchen, there's a toe kick under your cabinets. It'll be mounted that low, so about 4 inches off the ground, shining down. All you will see is very light glow of reflected light.
Now, before you move on from that, so how can you go about putting an uplight on a tree and not shining light into the night sky?
The beam of the optic in there is very narrow, 20 degrees, right? Yeah. 20 degrees, and so that's actually a really great question. When we plant these trees, the fronds are going to be, the heads, or rather, of the cocoa palms aren't going to be full. There's not much capture light that may skirt the trunk of the tree. So we aim the light almost immediately, off the ground at the trunk. Thank you. Then over time, that aiming may increase slightly. The idea is to light and have it terminate the very center part of the crown of the tree. Yes, there will be some light spill.
Code is minimized, not eliminated.
Do you mean to say coconut palms?
Yeah.
Because I believe that we've discussed this in the past, and I believe Mr. Murphy and I both objected to the idea of coconut palms. On the record, as I remember, I don't know if anybody else did or not.
I remember the conversation
I
being
do.
had. I don't know that there was a consensus, a direction to.
I think there was an objection, and I didn't think we came up with the substitute. We didn't nail down the substitute. I think for the purposes of this discussion, we didn't want them because of the nuts.
They're a liability.
Yeah. And what can happen unless someone constantly taking the nuts off the tree. That was the suggestion at the time. I don't recall we came up with a solid solution, but,
Well, I think it's their job to come up with the substitution. So I just wanted to make that clear that I know we're talking about lighting, but when you said that, I was like,
I remember the conversation very clearly,
Yeah.
but what I don't recall is whether there was a direction for us to find a substitute. The reason that we were using coconuts, again, consistent. Coconuts all the way up and down Willows, Bard. We're in Bayside Park already. I might say that does a great job of keeping them.
right, but it costs the town money in order to
True,
keep trimming them. If they don't get trimmed, it's a liability if they fall on somebody.
There are liabilities with other palms, and specifically royals.
Oh, yeah,
Front on a royal can,
a royal can
Yeah,
hurt
that
somebody badly when
Somebody badly.
when it falls, but,
Oh, well, not to get, too sidetracked on that, part of this, could you come back with some alternatives that the council could consider with regard to coconuts? And we'll discuss that hopefully in March.
I can suggest them now.
Well, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I just want to get through
There's-
this, though.
yeah, no,
And then
that's
if you
fine.
want to do that
No,
at the
that's fine.
end,
Okay.
that'd be okay. I
Yeah,
just
sure.
don't want to get sidetracked.
and leave the coconut as a possibility as well, just because the vice mayor and I may have reservations. That doesn't mean the rest of the council.
I think you'll find that,
There's something to be said about consistency.
I think you'll find that deal down here at the beach, the coconut. And the reason is the alternatives are very straight trunks, smaller front heads, not be really well in scale with the alternative is a royal palm. You see at the same maintenance. Similar.
Before you move on from this, can you, just for the people listening that may or may not know, can you just touch on, one, what RGBW is, and how, when you change the colors, it affects or doesn't affect the wavelengths?
We're gonna get to that.
We are, okay.
We are, yeah. Controls, yes.
I would like to go, back to our lighting discussion before we got it from the.
Let's do that too, but since we're setting the table, that Dan asked a good question, but also maybe our council could just clarify for people that might be watching. We've referred to the code numerous times. We're talking about the town ordinance? Are we talking about state code, or what are we talking about here? Town ordinance. So this is all trying to comply with the town ordinance, not other state obligations. Okay,
We are compliant.
thank you.
Could you go back to the code where you said it said minimize? And there's also code where it says, in the definition of luminaires, where we should keep light from shining directly up. Contention is that this is at an angle, so it's not.
All aimable, and there is no, directly up is straight up. It would be, seen images of the Hard Rock Bar Hotel. Top of that is a nest of light. It's shining straight up. And fixture controls.
There's your RGB white.
Yes. RGBW is spectrum light. It's colors, Bill. Infinite number of colors. It's a very sophisticated control system, which code is silent on controls. We're really using next piece of code.
Let me quickly just, so again, the RGB lights, RGB white lights are landscape lights only, and those will be off during turtle season. So the question about wavelengths and things like that, we're saying that that's not going to be a problem. Street lighting, the pedestrian safety lighting, is white, 3,000 Kelvin color temperature, which is constant, that's not changeable. And a second board is infused or an array is offset inside that produces long wavelength, friendly light. It's 590 nanometers. So those are one or the other. And so that should answer the question about what happens with the wavelengths on the RGB. They're all different wavelengths. It's multiple wavelengths built on top of each other to a length that the eye interprets as is.
So your landscape and accent lighting is not necessary for safety. It's strictly for aesthetics.
Yep.
Right. To that end, back when we were in the concept phase of projects, this was the slide showing the direction. Holders groups that we met with chose, the merchants groups, ultimately council chose. The right, very similar to the landscape lighting we'll be doing for the trees in Times Square Park. Far left in the middle, that is the accent light that I spoke about. It's underneath the bench structures. Go there. Left is similar to what's proposed for the stage lighting, where all the fixtures are lit and tucked into
The items were value engineered out.
that thing.
What's going to happen with that bench seat lighting? I'm assuming that's RGBW as well.
It is.
Will that be on or off the entire year, or will that be coincide with the landscape lighting?
It's really up to and ultimately whether that stays on. Yes, it's not essential for safety, but it does help provide ambiance for the space, keep how much or how little light stay on parts of the is to.
That's dimmable as well?
It's all dimmable, yeah.
And that light, the actual lights, are they up under the walkway, or are they in the ground shining up on?
They're up under the toe kick.
Right, the toe kick. Concept here from 2019, pretty consistent. Moving on now to chapter 32, in this article 5, the sea turtle conservation, how we meet the intent of this code. Here's the application for the code. It really is all light. It is all light. Rightfully so. I do the right thing. Spring nesting season for the of definitions, nighttime meaning between sunset and sunrise. Season May 1 through October 30 goes out. For again, there's nothing specific written in this code for right of way. That's in the other part of the code, but not for right of way. Care. We're meeting this anyways. The two closest sections, 32107 outdoor area, 108 parking areas. So Times Square does have a small parking area. So this is the closest piece of code that would apply. And both essentially say the same thing. In addition to the fixture standards we already covered with it, undirected, cut off, fully shielded, long wavelength, that's a requirement here. 590 nanometer light, and that it is mounted at the minimum level required in parking areas. essentially the lowest possible point. Here we are again, talking about when the fixture is in this long wavelength light. Here's a section of where, or I guess how tall the mounting height is, and it truly is the lowest possible mounting height for a number of reasons. One of them is have to maintain in Times Square fire truck access. It's in the square, and so we need 20 feet of clear space between them. If these fixtures were any lower, the light would not spread to provide the required for safety. Another thing to consider when you're designing a streetscape, vandalism, quite honestly. So lowest we go is 12 feet. That's because, you know, a person holding a stick can knock out a light at that level. There are other things to consider, and banner arms that advertise events and to be at a certain height that you walk safely under 1.5 feet. So you pull all those things together, and we arrive at the lowest possible point for the fixture heads are 12. In addition to, or outside of code requirement, oh, that's nice. This fixture is FWC guideline compliant. So, and you can talk to Bill about this than I can. But FWC has a set of guidelines that fixtures.
Snyder, Sesco Lighting. Fixtures that we're using on the project are compliant with FWC with regards to shield a long wavelength. Only issue that they don't carte blanchely approve is the dual light source. You don't want to open that can of worms. They have on occasion approved it on a case-by-case basis. So that's the reason ahead of the in the retail environment and the tourism season, and at the pedestrian scale at which we're at is reason we not submit this for approval, because during COVID they have ceased all compliancy. But Christy Siphon is the one that interfaces with them in the Panhandle. She has an excellent with it, and sure is compliant. All the reasons we discussed.
Sorry, did you say we're talking about Times Square? So the FWC has not approved the dual light option? They only
Have in the past on a case-by-case basis.
We explored that option, but due to COVID, they have not, they're not reviewing anything.
Nothing. Zero. It's shut down.
So even if we wanted to get it, we couldn't. The point here is, had it gone through, this letter is telling us that it does meet that requirement.
And it, you know, you have the flexibility to turn it on and off at will. And so during the turtle nesting season, definitely comply in amber.
Just to kind of wrap this up, so for Times Square, you're talking about only an amber fixture?
On Times Square, we're still using a dual board. Season is October 31st.
Yep.
During that time, the town right now goes out and replaces white bulbs.
Physically replaces?
Physically replaces them. Now you'll have the same exact responsibility to do that. It'll be done from it.
It'll be done automatically, actually, through an astronomical time clock. You can override it
now
at any time you want. And if it defaults, it defaults back to the level at which the astronomical time clock for.
I thought you just said that the FWC didn't.
No, they do on a case-by-case basis. They don't carte blanchely approve it. It's
You
on a
said
case-by-case.
you've gone and
We've actually have installations of dual lights.
have you gone for this case, approval for this project?
No, because of COVID, you can't, they're not reviewing anything. It's shut down.
So they're not even applications, they're not
They don't,
physically.
they will not, no fixtures, anybody are being reviewed due to COVID.
This is not a fixture you used in the past.
No, this is a brand new fixture.
Okay, I got it.
Board
If it-
similar or
Oh,
identical
absolutely.
to another one that
Yeah,
has been?
that's why we provided you the letter.
Technology's the same.
Correct.
But you're,
It looks different.
you're
Correct.
saying the actual head is just not,
Exactly.
It's like our streetlights, right? That they stopped approving, the lights that they have for streetlights are 5 years old now. I mean, there's other lights, but they just haven't physically approved those new fixtures.
WC is reviewing nothing. They're shut down. There's no issue with this being approved, in a turtle compliant.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm kind of getting really mixed messages here, because part of it is saying fixture is not approved because FWC is not approving anything, but we've had similar fixtures in the past that have been approved. So you're saying you're looking at putting in a fixture that has not been approved by FWC at this time.
correct.
Compliancy, everything about this fixture meets the requirements from FWC as stated in that letter. Cutoff, wavelength, shielding, regression of board, all that.
But it has not been approved yet
Correct.
as a dual light source.
With that
Specific fixture.
architectural piece on top had not been approved.
All the internal components have been approved.
And I understand, it's just, are all the i's dotted and all the t's crossed, and, so one side, I see what everybody's saying, we've done 9 different projects that are very, very similar, they've all been approved, but this one is a new fixture that hasn't been, but the other side of me says, we're speccing out a fixture that right now we cannot put in.
I'm not sure that's accurate, but
This fixture has not been approved.
I think that project's nature, I'm sure FWC approval is required.
Does the code say it has to be FWC certified?
No, I don't.
Okay, but you were calling this as a street, and street lights that we put on Stara Boulevard have to be FW. But this thing doesn't.
Was that due to a funding requirement? Or another, what was the requirement to trigger that? Dana?
I was thinking the same thing, Mayor.
Question?
Yeah, the question is, we're looking at a dual light fixture for the Times Square. The fixture itself, to my understanding, this particular fixture has not been approved by FWC. The question is it necessary? Because my understanding is that the streetlights on Estero Boulevard require FWC approval.
Okay.
Thinking about the streetlights on Estero Boulevard that are white, that they're ones that are not visible from the beach off during the season. Problem with the so if we have a whole boulevard of lights that are white, actually, those lights would not meet FWC requirements. Where they fail is when they are visible, where the FWC enforcement
But is it a
I think that-
requirement or is it an approval? It's
Is it a
different-
requirement or is it an approval, Suzanne,
For new
for
installation.
new installation?
You know what, I don't want to commit to an answer. I don't think it's a requirement, but I would sure want to go check, make sure that that was the case.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You can move on. We've got this down to a hair of a nuance there, so.
I have a question. Was that fixture designed by a UM graduate? Looks like the hurricane colors up there.
Yeah, so that's just a representation of what the amber.
An artist rendering. So new that I have a picture of it. So here's a suggested lighting control scenario. And again, and this isn't lighting. Basically, what we've talked about already is that nesting in the code. Lights are in long wavelength. Okay. Outside of nesting season, essentially for the benefit of the fact that this is downtown. This is close. But Times Square is part of the activity. These were, as we did earlier, council meetings, and just kind of showing the difference between these fixtures going white light to amber.
Yeah, and you can see the backup one, just so you see the toe kick light. That may be something you want to leave on during turtle season, or you could just turn it all off. It's,
Or change the color.
change the color.
And just in these drawings too, just for, in case anybody in the public is watching this, because I've had some confusion about it, that we currently do not have that sail in the design.
Of a placeholder.
But that is not currently in the design, because I've heard some complaints.
The second piece again is landscaping fixture and how this how we respond to Article 5. And the closest piece that touches on anything is landscape related or decorative. This is this section which talks about special events. Light associated with those special events are simply not authorized at nighttime during a nesting season. So in line with that, here are the proposed controls. And the lighting's capable, all of the landscape lighting is spectrum capable. Out of season during special events and holidays. And during season, they're simply off at down. And one step further, maybe there's a scenario where I know kids and I come down for sunset, and there's a celebration always in Times Square. So prior to sunset, Square is lit as the sun's dropping in the colors of sunset to reflect that. As sun sinks and lights dim off. That's it.
Bill, just for public consumption, maybe it's Bill or maybe it's you guys, is there a chart out there that gives a wavelength data to, say, different colors, purples, greens, reds, golds? Is there a chart available that you could provide for
I
public
believe I
consumption?
should be able to get the spectral distribution of all the primary colors in the RGBW, and I could provide that in the submittal.
It would be helpful.
Because they have to OEM the chips from the manufacturer, and they would get the spectral distribution, the wavelength information when we submit FWC on the.
think it would be very helpful. I don't know if the rest of my council members would find it interesting, but I think people that are very in tune to what is going on here, that would be a beneficial piece of data for them to review.
The OEM chip information should be readily available and can be provided.
Thank you.
And do you ask that so you could help us to better understand what the different color options are available to us? Is that why you asked
Yeah,
that?
so every color has a different wavelength of light. So even though they may be on, at Christmas they're red and green, is it, and it happens to be during turtle season, is it, you know, or if, say 4th of July, you have them red, white, and blue. Would those colors be within the 500 nanometer? That's why I wanted the data, so people could look at that to answer the question before they have to ask it.
Yeah, so the amber is 590. As you go more red, it gets even longer. And then eventually it disappears off of what we can see. It goes to infrared. I think infrared is something like 600 nanometers, 600 and change, 650, like that. So as you get for red, the longer the wavelengths get. Consequently, when you go the other way to purple, shorter.
Like, question.
So that's it. Here are the key takeaways. We've demonstrated that fixtures meet the fixture standard. The 32 Sea Turtle demonstrated that code. Pointed out some areas where it is silent on mobile LEDs, the technology and the control systems. Fighting. The fact that this is all controlled by the town also enforces. That plans all the way through.
Any questions?
Many questions.
Hey, you know what? I learned a new acronym today. BUG.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway from this day.
He always said bug lights were the red lights, so you don't get bugs.
That's fantastic.
I guess
Questions?
I don't have questions necessarily, but I have a couple things to say. I feel like I personally have expressed two different, I expressed concerns about whether the lights met the code, and I also expressed an opinion about the palm tree issue. And I feel kind of ignored on both of the things that I presented. I didn't feel like you came back with any variations on what you'd already given us. If somebody expresses a concern to me, when I come back with an answer, I'll say, well, this is why I think I was right the first time, but if you don't like that, then here's another alternative. And I didn't feel listened to, I guess. And then you kind of followed that up by not listening to what I said about the trees. So I'm not feeling a lot of trust, I guess, would be the word I would use. I also have a problem with the fact that you keep using the word intent, following the intent of the code. I've been having a lot of discussions recently with someone who's a developer on the island about an issue, and I keep telling that person what it says in writing is what we have to follow, and this person keeps saying to me, well, that's not what was intended. Black and white words mean something, so to me it's kind of a thing that I've seen people use when they're in a shady area. Well, I'm following the intent of the law. Now, I understand what you say when you say LEDs really haven't been addressed, so there can be shades of following the law that are difficult because the law hasn't caught up with technology, but I didn't really feel comfortable that you kept using that word over and over again, the intent.
If I may, I think when we say intent, saying the code, not that we're being close enough but trying to get away with it. I think we highlighted.
Came across that way too,
Okay, that's not- I
just
don't
so
think
you
that's
know.
what-
No, I apologize
Yeah.
if that's the way it came across.
Yeah.
And also, if you feel like you listen to Bayside Park specifically, we did come back with some renderings showing full limbo in your suggestion, and it was a very good one. Only the line that sat underneath it.
And I have not complained about that.
We found a great new home for Oaks.
Any other questions?
I have a couple comments, and I agree with what the vice mayor is saying, that when you read the code and it says to minimize, well, certainly with the lights that are in the trees, so there's no way to keep all the light in the tree, and I think one way to minimize is to not put lights in the trees. I mean, that because what I read in intent, and actually this comes from something that Murph had in their meeting. Murph passed they passed a opinion saying that that they really want the designers that should follow the ordinance as written and set an example and follow both the letter and the intent of the rules. So I think that, to me, the intent when they say minimize, saying if you don't need it, don't use it. And so I think particularly with the uplights in the trees where you can't target, you can't keep light from spilling out past the object you're aiming at, I would like to see those removed from the plans. Another thing is that the dual light option causes me a little grief. Now, when I first really wanted a lighting plan for downtown, I was intending to include Old San Carlos and the numbered streets. Because as you know, they're kind of the bit between the projects. I have had some conversations with the town manager saying there are some difficulties with that, mainly, obsolescence. You put in a special light, a part of like the FP&L standard, and then you goes away and you're left with something like our clock, where it's hard to find replacement parts.
Actually, our blue lights, right, are in the same situation, just to be.
Yeah.
We're basically being held hostage by whoever has a spare part for whatever amount they want. We're having to pay it because we have no alternative.
And I understand why that's something, and that may come up with these lights down the road too. But when we had numerous hearings, we had our public safety committee and a marine research task force go through numerous meetings talking about streetlights. And one thing that all of our committees agreed on is that mixing light colors does create a safety issue. And specifically, if you're driving, you don't really want to have cars driving from 300K light or 3000K lights to amber lights, because it takes a while for the eyes to adjust. I would suggest that the same thing really applies to pedestrians. If they're walking from a white light area into a amber light area, their vision might be compromised. Or vehicles that are looking at this light as they're there, their vision may be compromised. So even though I know the intent, and it's obviously our busy season, it's also our darker season in the winter, I do have some issues with the colored lights. I'm not sure if they add as much, kind of give a way, view to me by having the lights change all the time. But I do have some concern that could create a safety issue and is not really adhering to of a lot of the turtle lighting ordinances and the safety that might compromise.
I'm a little confused there, Bill. We're talking about intent, and as the vice mayor said, it's black and white, it's not intent. So you can't use intent one way, not use it one way, but then want to use it another way. So if you just look at the black and white, the word minimize, and read the definition of it, there's no intent there. It's to minimize. So I don't understand how we don't want them to say intent, but then you're saying that wasn't the intent of the turtle-friendly part of the code.
Now I understand, we're kind of mincing words here, but to me the intent means is if you have clause A and you have clause B, and then you're talking about something, they're very clear in what they say, but you're talking about some special case that isn't in A and B, then A and B shows you what the intent is. B, saying intent is almost broader than saying what the letter is, because sometimes the letter doesn't cover every circumstance.
Which I get, but I guess what I'm trying to say is either we're going to use the intent of what the code reads, or we're going to use what the actual black and white words. You can't have it both ways.
Well, and the resolution from Murph was the intent and the letter. Not or, but and.
We'll have more discussions about it.
I'm
Well,
sure
let me just speak to that real quick. We're getting to the point in time where we have to make a decision. Not necessarily have to be today, but we are starting to run out of time. So, as you debate what you would like to see out there, let's do it with the understanding that we need to make a decision and hold to it soon.
Well, in that case, then I'll be the first one to jump out there. That I think they've put a lot of thought and energy into this. I think they were very compassionate with everyone's needs. I think they've done a very good job of meeting as much as possible. You still have the control to be able to turn them off if you need to. I think they add a very, very good value to enhancing what the look is. I don't agree with the fact that you're going to have eye fatigue walking. You know, one day they're going to be fluorescent, or they're going to be 3,000 Kelvin, and the next day they're going to be amber. You're not going to be walking from amber to white. You're going to see the same thing. One night you're going to see one thing, and then once turtle season starts, you're going to see another. So you're not going to have that white to amber that you're talking about, because my understanding is that it's going to go all the way down Old San Carlos.
Then I really don't understand, because I was under the impression that there's going to be light changing capabilities like you were talking about for the 4th of July, red and blue. That would be changing.
You have the capability to change it should you want to outside of turtle season. You've said you can have these lights off, or you can have them amber, or you could have them yellow. You can have them colors that are fit within the turtle-friendly nanometer spectrum. It doesn't have to be white. It doesn't have to be amber either. There are other colors, violets. There's other
I
colors that
don't
you
think
can
we're
make
saying
them.
the same thing, Dan.
Because the street lights are amber or white, right? The pedestal lights are amber
Correct.
or white.
But the accent lighting that you were saying you don't want to see the accent lighting.
I'm more concerned about the dual lighting. Well, the accent, any uplight, I have a problem with, because again, the code, points out in numerous places to either minimize or to, keep light from shining up. It's in a couple of places. Now, the idea of the changing light, the other variable here is movement. So if it's lit up white and people go off onto Estero Boulevard and cross at any one of our, 9 crosswalks there, then they are moving from a white light into an amber light environment.
Well, again, I'll just sum it up. I think the town manager is kind of asking for some direction because of time. I think they did a very good job. I think they were very compassionate. I'll restate it again. I'm in favor of the plan that they've brought forward.
I would like to have the uplights on the trees removed from the plan.
I have to say, I don't know if I want to have them removed or not. We weren't offered any other options, which is what I had hoped to receive when we said at the prior meeting, look, we're really not sure we're comfortable with this. I truly expected you to come back and say, this is why we think this should work for you. I'm all for defending your work, but here's an alternative, which we weren't given any alternatives, any ideas for alternatives. It was just, this is what we presented, and this is why I wrote right.
Maybe I can shed some light on that, pardon the pun. So, the reason perhaps for that is that because the light spectrum is totally controllable and able to be off, I believe, and I don't want to speak for them, but I believe what their thought was that once the fixtures are installed and the system is operational, you control myself and the staff. And if you want them off, they're off. You want them, amber all year round, they're amber all year round. You want them amber on certain dates or months, they're amber on dates or months. So I think because what they offered you a product that was totally flexible for anything and everything, they were kind of addressing your concern. Now, obviously, we don't want to pay and put them in if they're going to be off all the time, because that would be a waste of money. But if you believe that there would be occasions where you would want lighting, that type of lighting, it's there, and we can control the color to whatever the council would like it to be. And that's why I believe, and I don't want to speak for the design team, but that's why I think they felt your concern about flexibility was being addressed.
Another thing that you may want to consider as an alternative is that maybe the lighting is only on from dark until 10. Then you turn it off. And the pedestrian traffic, diminishes as further into the night. Everything is fully dimmable, so the intensity is controllable as well as the color. And it can be controlled on or off with an astronomical time clock, whatever you guys want to configure it at. Really, as flexible as be.
That's a very good point, Bill. I'm glad you brought that up. We do it all the time when we program lights for people. They go from, say, sunrise or sunset to 11 o'clock, they're one intensity. Then they go down from 11 to 2, and then they shut off. And it's all done through programming automatically, so someone doesn't have to sit there all the time and make changes. Or they get shut off. Sometimes they shut the lights completely off on anything that's on the beach side. So I agree with what the town manager is saying. They've given us the best possible solution with the most possible outcomes in this lighting presentation.
I agree to a point, and the reason why I specifically mentioned the trees is that I think that to install something that should be off is just a waste of our taxpayers' money.
It's your opinion that it should be off. It's not my opinion that they should be off. I think those lights do exactly what the code says. It minimizes the amount of light escaping into the sky, far better than many other properties on the island that we see. Again, I think they've been very compassionate to the needs and the wants of all of our committees and the council, and they've brought a very good proposal forward.
I think, well, there's a couple of points of this, and one is that it doesn't minimize it because you can't control the light goes through the trees. To minimize it, don't have it. That's more of a minimum than having a problem with, having it carefully aimed. It just don't have it. And the other point is that you mentioned other properties. As a town, I mean, it's an interesting position to be in, to be both the grantee and the grantor of some kind of permit. The town be setting an example of what we expect other people to do by not having uplights and trees, or are we going to be the one saying, okay, it's all right, and then people will take more liberties from there?
The code does not say uplights are not allowed. It says to minimize the escape of light into the sky. It doesn't say they're not allowed.
Yeah, it says to minimize, and there's two places where it says, where it's defining the luminaires, when it says all the full cutoffs and everything else, and it says specifically that they should have an opaque top to keep light from shining directly up. Now, directly and either, this even goes down to, it's not like these bright lights, 260 lumens, a 20-watt incandescent light bulb equivalent can't be shining directly up.
And I think they did a very good job of explaining to us that those lights are not going to be aimed directly up into the sky. They are going to be aimed at the tree at an angle. They're not directly aimed up in the sky.
The trees are up. It may not be directly up, but it's fairly up.
If we want to have a discussion about changing the code to say uplights are not allowed and then that ends any controversy, we can have that discussion. But based on what the code says now, and please, Victor, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the attorney, what they presented, are they within the code rights to be able to do it?
As the code reads, it's minimize. Now, what does that mean? It's a subjective definition.
I'm glad you asked. I brought it up.
Go ahead, Victor.
Minimize. Reduce something, especially something unwanted or unpleasant, to the smallest possible amount or degree. That's the definition of minimize. There's no intent there. It's very black and white.
So what is the smallest amount? None.
Again, if we want to get into a conversation about changing the code, I'm all for having a discussion. The way it reads now, to me, they have done a very good job of making it a minimal intrusion of light.
Again, you read your definition. None is still less than.
Well, then I would say that would be eliminate, not minimize. That would be eliminate. It's a different word.
Could I slightly change our angle here? I noticed Chad sitting out there, and I hate to put him on the spot, but he is our environmental officer. Do you have any feelings that you feel comfortable expressing, Chad?
Chad?
Well, Madam Mayor and members of council, Jason and Chad are here because, we want them to be able to help you understand how this code has been applied, not only this project, but to all the other people who to the town for with their lighting plan for their homes. And as Councilor Veach is suggesting, we can be the A plus 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 student, if that's council's desire, or we could be consistent with what's being done throughout the town, which might be a little lesser standard, or, and the idea of the system, again, just to reiterate, was to allow that flexibility. I agree with his point. If the direction is ultimately going to be keep them off all the time, it would be ridiculous to pay to put them in. But if you think that there would be opportunities where you would want them on sometime during the course of the year, then you may want to include them as part of the project, but.
Maybe that's the way to come at this. We as a group.
Chad is here and
I
Jason's here.
asked for Chad to speak.
Well, he's not speaking yet, I'm speaking. So maybe that's the way to come at this, is to,
So I guess I didn't get my question answered before you get to talk?
I asked Chad to come up, he did not come up.
He'll come up now.
Everybody,
Chad-
Chad Shoots, environmental
Chad, I want
staff.
to say this to you. I want to be very clear that what I said is what you feel comfortable saying, because I understand I'm putting you on the spot. Okay?
I'm good, I'm good.
Okay.
Oh, what's the question?
How do you feel about this? Do you have any opinions you wish to share with us?
So
Any of it.
yeah, I mean, I worked,
You may not have an opinion on, some of it you might.
yeah, I worked with Mr. Matt and went through each light and, looked at the specs, and in my opinion, they do meet the exceptions.
Oh, before you leave, now if we, because I remember in our sterile lighting condition, that one of the problems is even I think the FWC wasn't going to approve a dual light option. That's one of the reasons why, besides the committee is not being comfortable with it. If we install street lights, and these are considered street lights, I guess, in Times Square in an area that's exposed to the beach and put white lights in, does it jeopardize anything else we're doing with FWC? Does it put us in a position where it would be difficult to get tree nourishment or other things we want from them?
Speaking about Bayside Park,
Out Times Square.
so whenever I spoke with Matt, we mostly went over the Bayside Park, that is landward of the Triple CL. The Triple CL, if you're seaward of the Triple CL, which I assume Times Square is, that would trigger FDEP permitting, I would assume, which would also have FWC commenting on the exterior lighting.
Okay. And would it be difficulty putting a light that could potentially be a 300K in that area?
I can ask FWC for.
Questions for Chad? Chad?
Yes, sir.
So, Council V, just to, my experience with FWC, not that I'm an expert with them, but is they're going to tell you what you can't do, not what you can do. So they're going to say you can't exceed X, Y, and Z during turtle season. They're not necessarily going to say what you can do. But we can inquire and find out.
And I mean, I've, not probably to the level that Councilman Allers has, but, I have smart lights and things around my house, and I've got a couple of them where I've got a weird power outage and they go into different programming mode. Somebody's stuck on or stuck off. You really don't completely know. But I am concerned that, just putting in something, particularly the uplights into trees, I don't think it's really consistent with the intent of our code. And I'm using intent to mean what direction the code is pointing us to, because like I said, there's 4 places where they discourage lights from shining up. And this is an area we're doing it, we reflect off the tree, and that light now is if it's a reflected light, that light's like a really high light source. So I think that particularly, and I would, I'm suggesting this one thing is to remove the uplights on the trees. Because I understand all the programmability that we can do for everything else, because this is one thing I think that we install something that should be off, I think is just a waste of money. The other lighting, the other programmability, I'm not really complaining about, but this specifically, putting the uplights in the trees, I think is just a waste of money.
Bill, I think I can ease at least one part of what you just said. The smart lights that you probably have at home have a limited capability of what you can do for programming and probably from your phone. I'm assuming that this controller has, with the astronomical clock, a default setting that if for some reason there is a power outage, you could set a default light level or a default color through programming. Is that capable of doing that, Bill? Should the power go out, come back on, it will default to a specific, whether it be amber or whatever color?
Bill Snyder, Sesco Lighting, yes, it'll actually default back to where the astronomical time clock says it should be. So if it was in a dimmed mode to 20% at 10 o'clock or off, it will come back to that, where that is per the time, because there's a battery in the astronomical
If there was a
time.
power outage in the middle of turtle season, it would come back on to that previous setting that it was before the power outage.
Correct, and the default is off.
It has like a backed up memory in it.
It has a battery, actually.
And if the battery is out, or if there is an electrical disturbance where it's not just
Let you
power
know.
out.
Just like you have a battery backup at home, when the battery starts going bad, it gives you that loud beep and alert. I'm assuming that this has some sort of warning that, hey, your battery's getting low.
I believe it's 30 days is the battery backup. I live in the community, and I think the longest I've ever experienced an outage was during Charlie. It was like 11 or 12 days.
My experience with working with microcontrollers through most of my career is when there's a problem with power, you never quite know where they're going to go. And I understand that battery backups are a redundancy for the power, but sometimes if you get a spike power or if interruption, the processors can still be interrupted. It can happen.
Maybe there's a misunderstanding. The battery's there just to keep the astronomical time clock going so it knows where it is. It has nothing to do with the lights or anything like that. So when the power does resume, the clock knows where it is.
So the clock is a separate system that feeds
The
all
clock
the
is
lights.
part of the low voltage switching system that controls the system. So when there's a power outage, there's an astronomical time clock built in with a separate power supply. When there's an interruption of power, that it keeps the clock going. It knows when the power restores itself where it is.
So just to reiterate, what I believe you're saying is the lights would be off, power.
Correct.
Okay, and then when power is restored, based on the clock, it would go to the setting for that particular date and
They
time.
say it was 7 days later, 6 hours, 49. The clock knows where it's at, and it will come on for whatever it was set to do at that time.
Okay, and Council Veach, I'm not stating your position on this issue. I just want to be clear for the record. What I heard Paul and Matt say that those landscaping lights are aimable, so they could be aimed anywhere from the base of the tree where it intersects with the ground, as far upward, depending upon tree growth and the limb and frond coverage, et cetera. So I just want to be clear.
They can be, but they cannot be aimed to where they only hit whatever the vegetation is and not go into the sky.
Again, they could be aimed at any part of the tree that you direct us to aim it at.
I think that, Councilman Allers and I have both expressed our views on the one specific point about should we put lights shining up into a tree. I'd like to hear what the rest of the council has.
That's the question. We're really in the weeds here now. So you have your point of view. You don't want any lights going up into the trees. You have your point of view where you say that it can be controlled and adjusted accordingly, and the flexibility in the plan.
Mr. Mayor.
Now it's a matter of getting a consensus among the rest of the group as to whether we go absolutely none or have it and be able to control it the way it's been presented to us.
Okay.
That's the question.
There's just another option. I just want to be sure that you all consider it as you debate this issue further. And that is that we could pre-wire and have everything there other than the actual fixture. And, some later date, there may be a fixture that you're comfortable with. But I just want to make sure you're aware of that option as well.
Okay.
And just to be clear on some of your language when you were stating this, is that I'm just talking about one portion of this lighting plan. But absolutely nothing.
No,
just this
exactly,
one
no,
portion.
exactly. And I think I said that, the lights going up through the tree. That's what I'm talking about. That's the only thing we're talking about right now. Everything else is what I've heard is agreeable to everybody else. Right?
Huh?
No, except for the trees.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to say I'm sliding toward Bill's position. To me, the lights going up provide public safety. No. There because somebody thinks it's pretty and generally not accepted to be a thing that's really a good thing environmentally. So I would say that if I were going to vote on this, I would say, yeah, we'll go with this plan, but just leave out the uplights and the trees. It's just for prettiness.
Well, having listened to all this, the selection of the tree aside, it seems like what's been presented to us today has the flexibility to address all of Councilor Veach's concerns, utilize all the tools that Councilor Allers has talked about, and that decision will leave us the flexibility as over the coming years to make those decisions. The fact that the plan presented today allows us to address every concern that's been raised today and still utilize all the tools in the toolbox seems like a pretty fair compromise. So I would support what was presented today.
I agree with you, and I agree with Councilman Allers. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think it can be worked out with everything that's built into the plan. That's the direction that where we stand right now. Okay. What else do we have to do with this lighting discussion? Anything else, Roger?
No, we'll continue to advance the projects that are under design to 100% based on the comments we received from town council today.
Okay. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you very much for your presentation. And we'll move on to the final item on the agenda, which is agenda management.
Mr. Mayor, before you do that, just to sort of wrap up the prior issue so that the council can deliberate now in our next meeting. So, summarize my understanding. P&L on the vehicle chargers wants to put the quick chargers in only in the Times Square area. They're not interested in other locations of the town because my understanding of their analysis is that those would not be have a rate of return on their investment for the more expensive quick chargers. If you want chargers at other locations, such as were suggested, such as Newton here at Town Hall and Bay Oaks, picked FP&L, we would still have to do some type of charger by the town for those locations. Have a hybrid system. Alternative would be for us to have our town chargers through company presented today or some other company for all locations, or a hybrid system. As you consider that, I think there is advantage to having the shorter operation chargers in the Times Square area for turnover purposes, and versus perhaps someone who parked here or Newton or Bay Oaks, where someone's going to be there for a couple hours. That's kind of what you have before you as you think about this and take it up at our next meeting.
Can I ask you, Mr. Town, first of all, you've given us two excellent presentations, two excellent options. From an administration standpoint, do you have a particular preference as the town manager asked to administer this program?
Well, clearly, in a perfect world, I would like to have one system, one vendor, one whatever, rather than multiples. However, that being said, think the protection that might be offered by having two, in this case, may be an exception to that general rule. Particularly because the expense for the fast chargers is so large. You asked me if what my vote would be, per se, would be to consider the fast chargers in the Times Square area and the town-owned chargers at other locations, if the council wants other locations.
And that, to step in, but sorry, are you saying that a hybrid between the two presentations would be you go with, or whichever company?
Yeah, I would suggest that we use FP&L in Times Square, and we use a company such as the company that was here today at the other locations, because people going to those other locations would be there for a longer period of time, whereas in Times Square, we would want to turn over for the rapid chargers.
You wouldn't necessarily support, or I guess not support. In your best case scenario, you wouldn't see using the fast chargers through just that one company, going off of what you started the comment with, is having one vendor versus two.
Yeah, I just think the expense is fairly significant, so that's the reason why I would.
If I understood the fast chargers, the difference isn't necessarily the time so much as the type of vehicle, that only certain vehicles can use the fast chargers.
No, I'm not sure.
As I remember the presentation, that's what they said. There's only certain vehicles that can use the fast chargers.
I think what I heard was that all but the very, very early electric vehicles use the fast chargers. Some of the ones that were the initial ones manufactured or before concept of fast chargers were available, so those won't work with the fast chargers, but the vast majority of vehicles will work with the fast chargers.
I thought he made that comment in response to Dan talking about the 110 add-on. Those were the vehicles that were older.
Well, the old ones worked off of 110, and then level 1 charging. And the next generation was level 2 charging, which is what the gentleman today was suggesting at those 3 locations. And then what FP&L was suggesting was level 3 charging, which is the fastest in Times Square.
How amenable do you think both parties would be to working together? Or do you think it wouldn't matter?
I think that it would be fine with that concept, the hybrid concept.
There's nothing exclusive in the FP&L contract.
No.
Okay, thank you, Roger.
There's a couple of really interesting points to this. One thing I wanted to ask you, Roger, if we actually purchase these and install them, are there grants available in any of these programs coming out, the infrastructure program, to pay for getting these installed?
I can't say I know of one specific one we could go for today, but I do think that there is a desire to encourage the use of electric vehicles, and with that comes the need for a charging network. So I think there'll be opportunities. I just don't know that they're going to one right now and say, here's the one we would go after. I can't say that.
Because certainly I appreciate your success in getting grants, and that would certainly bias the decision if we can get money to pay for installing these.
I would be interested to find out if any of the CARES Act money could be used for these, if something like this could fall within that spectrum of broadband vastness that they put out there.
We can inquire if you want us.
The other thing that's kind of interesting is that, because we have an interesting interplay between parking spots and charging. And I was really impressed with this gentleman today when he was talking about, just charge by the hour. So, and I know that Vice Mayor Hasselfrost stated that she would like to see the charging stations free of just normal parking, because that lessens their value as a charging station, particularly for the expensive ones. But if we could just have those spots as a place where you can plug in and you pay a higher parking rate, put them together, and then it would make it simpler for the users, because maybe they only need to pay one place. You don't need to go and pay for parking on one app and then pay for charging on another. that I think there's a certain synergy there that I thought was kind of simple and it made a lot of sense to me.
Your point is well taken, Counselor. The flip side of it, though, also exists, and that is that if the spot is empty because no one's charging, do you want someone not to be able to park in it?
That's, and see, someone is willing to pay more for this last parking spot, even though they're not charging their car, then you provide an incentive to keep it open, but it's not a prohibition that keeps it open only for charging. So it's kind of a middle road of encouraging people to only use that for charging.
Well, if you want the parking spots in the Times Square area to continue to turn over every 2 hours, which has been our past practice, then you pretty much need to consider a fast charger by FPL or purchased by us at that location. If you want to extend the parking hours, then of course you go with the solar charger. But again, this is just for you to think about between now and the next meeting. So hopefully the next meeting, we can make a decision. If you have questions between now and then, of course, we'll do our best to get those answered for you.
Is there anything in the the FP&L, with their model, they'll install and they'll get the revenue. Now, is there anything in their contract that says that that can't be used for general parking? There's got to be exclusive for charging.
No, they understand that there'll be a parking fee associated with the spot as well as a charge. They're well aware of that.
Okay. The last item is agenda management. Does anybody have any, they'd like to add to this list?
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if this fits or not with agenda management, but we talked briefly, I think, at some point about codifying the council's concerns about the foot of the bridge project in a way that then the town manager and his team can put that in writing and then put those comments in the official record. I think just based upon all the public comments that everyone's made and the comments that they've made at the council meetings, I think we're in relative agreement about the broad concerns that have been raised. And I wondered if we might be able to spend a minute to convey those to the town manager in a way that he can then formally put those in writing to the state to formalize the council's position in a way that hopefully the state will be sensitive to those concerns and then make the appropriate adjustments.
It's a good idea, Jim, to do it officially on the record as a body. I agree with you. I don't know if Roger feels the need for us to say more. He can go back and look at what we've already said. Do you want us to talk more, or do you want to draft something and circulate it?
I think that we could take a sort of a stab at it and circulate it to you all, and then get some comments back. If there's a point that any of you want to make sure that's not missed, feel free to say it right now. But
Is this something we have to have FDOT before their deadline?
Yes. I think in order to be most effective.
they're using federal funds, so they have a prescribed comment period.
They had an end date on it, though. I think it was,
Yes, they did.
it was the 14th or?
14th through 17th, I think.
Week.
I mean, the comment that I've
It was this
heard
month.
on a recurring basis is actually two. One is the number of crosswalks in Times Square's area, and two is the guardrail in front of the removal of the guardrail in front of the ice cream shop. Those are the two that I've heard. But if there are other major ones,
I don't want to
free
speak,
to
I
share
don't
those
want
with
to
me.
speak for the vice mayor, but I know she talked quite a bit about the alternating stoplight.
Yes.
And I've talked quite a bit about pedestrian guardrails to channel people to crosswalks. If we can't get a pedestrian overpass, which again is aspirational, I'm sure, given the state's budget, but certainly something we ought to talk about. But if they can't do the pedestrian overpass, then some sort of pedestrian guardrails, either guardrails, or if they want to do it through through various shrubbery or whatever they want to do from a landscaping standpoint. I do think, too, it might be helpful for the state and the county to know if they choose to put those pedestrian channeling devices in place and they are landscaping in nature, would the town be willing to overtake the maintenance of those? And I would think this is such a priority location for the town, and traffic is such a priority project. I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I would certainly support the town being willing to do the maintenance on that landscaping if necessary.
We're talking, just to be clear here, talking within this project area, which starts, like Crescent Street? Are you specifically, the pedestrian channeling railings, you're talking about it from Crescent Street to the bridge or to the,
Well, that's a good question, Councilor Veach. My ideal scenario would be throughout strategic points throughout Estero Boulevard, but given what we have before us, it would be within the scope of this particular proposal, yeah.
for this suggestion, certainly.
Yeah.
One concern that I really have, and I have which, without the cantilever, getting rid of the pedestrian or the bicycle trolley lane gives me some heartburn from a safety standpoint. And also, I haven't heard if the fire department has weighed in on it. But one of my conversations, one of the firemen there, wasn't the chief, was that one of their difficulties is getting people off the island when they're in an ambulance. And if we are making 3 lanes, and as Councilman Allen said before, there's basically 2 of them are going to be mostly like a parking lot. And then you're going to have concrete barriers. It doesn't leave the emergency vehicles a whole lot of options.
I believe the fire department made their concerns known at that meeting. Chapel, at least that's what they told me. They didn't do it publicly, but they did make it known to the people that were in charge there what their concerns were. They didn't tell me what their concerns were, but they did say they let them know what their concerns were.
The big thing for me, I just can't see a safe way, you have so many more bicycles on the island, but you also have more bicycles coming onto the island over that bridge. And I think not allowing them a safe place to go is it's written in their requirements is to enhance pedestrian and bicycle safety and alternative modes of transportation. And I think, without keeping that lane, they don't get the cantilever, then I think they're going against their own stated requirements.
So I think I agree with you. Are you saying we should actually reference the cantilever in our letter, saying that we strongly support utilization? I know they have an engineering study as to whether that'll be allowable or not, but I think that's worth mentioning how important that is.
Yeah, and but they go through their procedures, right? And one of the quandaries they're in is that I get the impression they really think they can put the cantilever on, but they haven't got engineers okay yet. So, but if they don't know they can, then they have to present everything as if they cannot. Puts them in a hard spot, and it changes the entire dynamic all the way back to the alternating light if they don't have that cantilever lane on.
Anything else for agenda management? Roger, you have your direction there.
Yes,
for
we'll
your
draft
letter.
something up for you.
Are you done, Jim?
Yes, thank you.
One thing that I think we had discussed before, having on a future meeting, was an update from law enforcement. I had expressed concerns about the fact that both of our recent fatalities had to do with alcohol, and you indicated you would be inviting law enforcement here.
Yes, they're coming the first meeting in March.
So I don't know whether it needs to officially be on agenda management, but just wanted to reiterate that.
Just to, by email, I reached out to Captain Layler, and he's committed to being here or having a representative here at the first meeting in March.
Anything else?
Just one thing, Mr. Mayor, we had discussed a while back about, I don't know if it needs to be on here or not, about looking at the feasibility of hiring a consultant or doing what we need to do to potentially add a second turn lane at the base of the bridge onto the Estero Boulevard. I don't see that on here. I don't know if that needs to be added to discuss that out as to whether or not, we kind of gave them a verbal word with it, so I don't know if it needs to be added to here or not, but I just wanted to
Add
reiterate.
it to agenda management or add it to Roger's letter?
Whichever way it needs to be added, I just want to make sure it doesn't get forgotten.
Well, I think there's 2 parts to it. One is the part where you physically have made the right-hand turn and you're in front of Wynn's now. That's us. But The actual opportunity for that movement would be FDOT's. So we would incorporate that into the letter as well.
This letter would kind of help give them a heads up as to what our hopes and aspirations would be with respect to the issue Dan raised, I would think. I think it would be helpful to include in the letter so they have a better idea of what our intent is and our.
And I
We
certainly
really can't put it on our agenda until we know what they're gonna do.
Yeah, fair enough, as long as it's out there for the world
I
to see.
agree.
So let me, if I may, Madam Vice Mayor and Council, my understanding is that the council wants us to pursue evaluating, facilitating that option.
I would be in favor of it, yes.
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 I have a question. Yeah, I agree. I want to look into it, but I have just a question on that, Roger. Where that right lane is currently parking, now is that town parking or is that Wynn's parking?
It's town parking in front, in the right of way. What we would probably have to do is see if we can create customer parking for Wynn's on Center Street or not. That would be the ultimate question.
So is that parking, again, so are we taking out their parking that they
Oh,
own?
we can't go onto their property, but we believe that's why we need an engineer, but we believe there's room to do the lane in the right of way, but to do that, it would effectually take away their perpendicular parking.
Okay, so their parking approaches into the right of way. The line is not at the end of the parking or
Right.
clear, it's in between there somewhere.
The vast majority of those parking spots are in the town right of way, but there's a piece that's on private property.
Right. So then there could be a cost associated with this, with us giving up paid parking for their customer parking?
Well, I don't know that we have to do anything. We might want to do something. That's something we'll have to figure out.
Okay, so there could be a cost, just a consideration. I look
Right.
forward to the conversation.
Correct.
Anything else for the agenda management?
I just want a couple things we talked about previously. I just want to make sure that are on the list, Roger, they get on the list. A discussion on corner lots. The enforcement conversation.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Just to discuss our enforcement philosophies, and nothing specifically about vacation rentals, short-term rentals, but pretty much anything. As the vice mayor said, that now with the new state ordinance, every complaint is notified the name and address by state law, which makes it creates a bit of an awkwardness. The other thing is about how our housing is used. Councilor Adderholt kind of wanted to get a better feel, and I agree about our housing situation. How much short-term housing is there? How much annual rentals? How many ownerships? That
Exactly,
kind of thing.
all rentals, yep.
Yep, I'd like to get have that on, so maybe if you can either discuss what we want, more detail, or just if you can come up with something to present to.
Well, let me tell you what I intended to do in response to Adderholt's comment was to contract a consultant and get a proposal to gather that data. And when I have a draft of that proposal, I'll share it with the council and make sure it's encompassing, casting a wide enough net to meet all your needs. And then if you agree, that'll be the proposal, and the consultant will do that work.
Yeah, okay. And just, I don't know if it needs to be on the list, so we remember to get to it, or rather.
If you'd like it on the list, there's no problem having it on the list.
And the last is the MRF name change.
I think previously I had said that I agreed with Bill that we should discuss all of these things. If you're looking for the second vote pursuant to our policy manual.
Doing it without it going on the M&P, because I thought
That's
there
what I
was
heard. I thought we
consensus
were
that
just going to
everybody
do it at
was
the next agenda.
in agreement that the
With the
name,
MRF name, yeah.
name change, yeah.
Anything else?
Would also, just to respect the vice mayor's suggestion the other day, on Monday, about the appraiser being given information from the town, I'm wondering, just thinking out loud, person who does we charge a fee for the rentals to handle the administration of that program, that person checked to make sure that the appropriate tax status is met? I mean, that your idea, in other words, could we do that on our end?
The reason I didn't suggest that was that my understanding is it's state law, it's their duty to
No question,
enforce.
it's their duty, yep.
And that way, they're the bad guy, not us. We're not turning in specific individuals. We're turning over our entire list, and then they decide who that they want to enforce on.
Well, I got you. Clearly, they've either chosen not to do it or they're not doing it. I just wondered.
Well, I don't know that they're aware that our municipality has the short-term rental list.
Okay.
Many small towns don't. So by offering it to them, we've made them aware that there's something available to them, and then they choose whether to follow up on it. Whereas if one of our employees was doing it, we could be accused of singling out people for enforcement by, in essence, turning them in. And this way, it's not us turning them in.
I just thought that might be an effective way to get your idea moving forward. I worry that it just sits at the appraiser's office. Nothing may happen, but maybe I'm being too cynical.
The same thing could happen if we turned in specific names. They could choose to do nothing with it. So.
Okay. Try to be helpful.
You know, there's a bunch of kind of disconnected things here because like, I think that when you have a short-term rental, you register with the state, you register with the county to pay your bed tax, and then you register with the town. And so there are probably people out there who may be registered for the bed tax, but they're not registered with the town. If they don't know or they're in a place where they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And I'm not sure if both the appraiser and the bed tax are part of the county. So maybe they already communicate that information on a different level.
I don't know. I
I got a quick question for Victor on this. Maybe you can answer it, maybe you can't, or if you can look into it. I believe the concern was, Vice Mayor, one of your concerns was that there are people potentially homesteading their home here and renting it out as an Airbnb rental, which is illegal. Is there anything the town can do specifically on that instance to enforce it or revoke a license, or is there anything that we can do from a town standpoint if there is someone indeed doing that?
If they're in violation of the license with the town, they certainly can revoke that license. You would have to obviously have knowledge of them doing it first.
Anything else? You're all done? Okay, I guess we'll adjourn then. It's 7:42.